Hey guys, it's Jam here. It's my first ever A-level biology video. So I hope you guys don't mind any mistakes I made or any blunders that I make. So yeah, I'm still a student. I'm still learning. I'm not at that level of teaching or something yet. I'm not a professional. So yeah, I'm just gonna convey what I have learned from my teachers to you guys. All right, let's get into it. The introduction. So the general definition of energy is always that we have learned that the ability to do work, then the golden sentence. And where does energy come from and where is it used or stored? The basic laws of energy is that energy cannot be created or destroyed, and it's always converted from one form to another, to different mediums. And we also know that the sun is the main source of energy, so without sun, life wouldn't exist on Earth. Now, how wouldn't it exist on Earth? The secondary source of energy is always the plants. These plants, they take energy from the sunlight that come from the sun. They take the energy from the sunlight and convert it to the chemical potential energy. This process is called photosynthesis, and this chemical potential energy is then stored in organic molecules. There are a few types of organic molecules, for example, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and lipids. Now, these organic molecules contain the chemical potential energy, right? And the breakdown of these molecules to release the chemical potential energy in a usable form of energy that we can use, that our body can use, is called respiration. And that's what we're gonna learn in the chapter in detail. Now, energy cannot be directly released by these molecules, right? I mean, chemical potential energy is released, but the usable energy cannot be released. How to make it usable? Now, for this, we have a source of energy which is called ATP. It's a storage. It's for storage of energy, right? It's also called the energy currency. Why is it called energy currency? We're gonna make this clear later on, but right now, just know that it's the general source of energy. I mean, we use it for the release of energy. We use it for the storage of energy, and it's transported everywhere in our body. So yeah. Now, what is ATP? ATP is here. We can see ATP. This is the molecule of ATP. It contains adenine. The nitrogen is base. It contains pentose sugar, the ribose sugar. It contains three molecules of phosphate groups, and I mean three phosphate groups. Here it has one molecule of a phosphate group. You can see this, and there are three. That's why it's called an adenosine triphosphate, because tri means three, so three phosphate groups. Adenine and ribose together are called adenosine. So yeah. Now here when the main source of energy here for the in the ATP is the bond energy between these phosphate groups. Now the breakdown, I mean, if one bond's broken, there's going to be a lot of energy released, and this energy is going to be utilized. This energy is the usable energy. So yeah. Now here we can see that the ATP is being breaking that the ATP is being broken down to ADP, where you can see that adenosine triphosphate is being broken down to adenosine diphosphate by the addition of H2O. So we can call this process as hydrolysis. And this is in the presence of the enzyme ATPase. Always remember that whenever you see the word ase with something, it means breakdown. And whenever you see the word synthase with something, that means with an enzyme, that means it's for the building of something. Synthase is building up, right? And ase is breaking down. So yeah. Now, when a single bond of phosphate group is broken, like when a single inorganic phosphate is released, it releases 30.5 kilojoule per mole of energy. Now, the reverse of this reaction is condensation reaction. In this reaction, what happens is that ADP is converted into ATP. This happens by the addition of a phosphate group. and this requires energy. This reaction requires energy because, of course, when adenosine triphosphate was being broken down to ADP, it released energy. Now here it will require energy. So this energy is mostly supplied by two ways, two reactions. Number one is substrate link reaction, and the other way is chemiosmosis. Substrate link reaction is pretty simple, in which the energy that is required for the breakdown of for the building up of ADP to ATP is required by another supplied by another reaction. For example, there's another metabolic reaction in your if there's another metabolic reaction in your body that is releasing energy, substrate the ADP is just going to use that energy to fulfill this energy supply and to form ATP. But in chemiosmosis, what happens is that the cell itself generates energy for this reaction of ADP, right? This reaction that I showed you guys here. So yeah, chemiosmosis we're gonna learn this later on this chapter. We don't need to go in detail right now, but yeah, I'm just gonna give you guys an overview that it's because of the movement of hydrogen ions and down their concentration gradient. So you guys know that there are two types of respiration: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is always in the presence of oxygen, so yeah, always remember that. Now, aerobic respiration occurs in 4 stages. Number one, glycolysis, which occurs in the cytoplasm, and the rest of them are link reactions, Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation. They're going to be covered later on in the chapter. Right now, we're going to learn about glycolysis. So, always remember that glycolysis is it consists of the phosphorylation and splitting up of glucose. And always, I told you guys that the main respiratory substrate should be glucose. Like, the first thing should always be glucose here, because any other carbohydrate is going to be converted to glucose first, and then it's going to continue this reaction. So it has to be glucose here always. Just remember this thing, that it always has to be glucose here, right? Okay. So what happens in this reaction? Glycolysis. Now in glycolysis, the first step is that glucose is being phosphorylated. Phosphorylated means addition of phosphate group to glucose. How is it so? ATP is a 3-phosphate group containing compound, which is broken down to ADP. That means an inorganic phosphate will be released, right? Phosphate group will be released here. Now another ATP is being broken down into ADP. This means 2 phosphate groups will be released here, right? This is common sense, right? ADP broken down to ADP, ATP broken down to ADP, 2 phosphate groups released. Now these 2 phosphate groups are going to go and attach to glucose. Look at here, like 1 phosphate group here, 1 phosphate group here. So this is going to form a compound called fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. As you guys can see, like, glucose wasn't attached with any phosphate group here, but these 2 phosphate groups were released. Now they attach to glucose and it forms fructose 1,6-bisphosphate, and thus glucose is phosphorylated. Now this compound that is formed is a really unstable compound, and so it breaks down into 2 compounds: DHAP, which is dihydroxyacetone phosphate, and glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So both of these compounds are 3 carbon compounds. As you guys can see, 1, 2, 3 carbon compounds with a phosphate group attached to them. The other word for these groups, which you guys need to learn, is triose phosphate. You don't need to learn these terms here. You just need to learn that 2 molecules of triose phosphate are formed. Now, this DHAP is always converted to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, because this reaction cannot continue if DHAP is present. It always needs to be converted into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So now there are going to be two molecules of glycerol D3 phosphate because DHAP is also going to be converted into glycerol D3 phosphate. See, like, this was one molecule broken down here, and this was one molecule broken down here. But now this molecule is also going to be converted into this molecule so that the reaction continues. So there are going to be two molecules of glycerol D3 phosphate. So in general, all these reactions are going to happen twice, like all these reactions, right? And what happens here? In in this reaction, glycerol D3 phosphate, the triose phosphate, is converted into the end product pyruvate. This happens by okay. So now here we see a term NAD, NAD positive. NAD positive is a hydrogen acceptor, and the glycerol D3 phosphate is a hydrogen denator. I mean, it donates this hydrogen to the NAD plus, and the NAD plus is already a hydrogen acceptor, so it's going to accept this hydrogen and it's going to get reduced. So we can say that NAD has been reduced, and this is reduced NAD. On the other hand, glycerol D3 phosphate loses hydrogen and causes the reaction oxidation occurs because it's a loss of hydrogen, so oxidation, right? Now when NAD, which is a coenzyme, and I told you guys is a hydrogen acceptor, just accepts this hydrogen, right? After that, ADP, now here ADP is being converted into ATP. ADP is being converted into ATP. Here we learned before that ATP was being converted to ADP. Now the opposite is happening. This is happening 2 times here, and all of this happens 2 times. I told you guys, like, the whole thing happens 2 times, so it's gonna be 4 times ATP produced, right? I mean, one here, and all of this multiplied by 2, so 4. And 2 of the ATPs were used here. That means 4 minus 2, so net the profit ATP we get is 2 basically. The end product is pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon compound, and this continues in the link reaction later on. And yeah, this is it for the first video basically. And wait, yeah, I think I covered it all. Okay, yeah, 2 molecules of ADP were formed here, and ATP was used, right? And 2 molecules of ATP are formed here, multiplied by 2, which is 4, and 4 minus 2, so 2. Net is 2 molecules of ATP. And one more thing that I had to tell you guys is the frequently asked questions here. In exam, they ask the definition of respiration, which is the breakdown of organic molecules to release chemical potential energy and convert it into usable energy by the process of photosynthesis. I mean, sorry, what am I saying? By the synthesis of ATP, right? And C6H12O6. This is the general equation for respiration, which we all have learned from the starting. Okay, what makes ATP so suitable as an energy store? Now, this is a really frequently asked question. I mean, I have like answered this question many times. I mean, in past papers and all of that stuff. So ATP, basically, ATP is really what the question is: why ATP? Why not any other thing? Just why ATP? So this is because ATP releases a really convenient and a small amount of energy, which is not more than required and which is not less than required. So it releases a really convenient amount of energy, and so energy is not wasted in excess. And its breakdown is a single step reaction, so it can be immediately supplied when you need it suddenly. For example, if something happens to you suddenly, right? If, for example, you touch a really hot cooker and you need to remove your hand suddenly, so ATP is going to be given to you suddenly, and ATP is going to be broken down suddenly to release energy for you. And for example, ATP, one more example is that ATP is a small and insoluble molecule, so it can be transported anywhere easily around the cell. It's soluble, so it can be soluble inside the blood plasma, or the water. So yeah, this is it for today's video, and I hope you guys understood all of it. And it was my first video. I'm sorry again. I made many mistakes probably, and I'm still not at that level yet, but um, I'll I'll improve next time. So yeah, till next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you.